Good morning, everyone. Happy Lag BaOmer. What a head of the day. And the schus Rabbi Shimon be Yamitz Tov Ba'adenu and bring down Shefer Bracha Batzlacha for the whole world. Ben B'Prat, Ben B'Klam. Wonderful day. Okay. Doesn't need my endorsement. We're learning Perek Beis today. Today's shiur is Lila Nishmas, Aaron Nachman, Sefer Kohen, Shomorcha, V'Shepsa, Bracha Shabbos, Shmolev, and B'nai Moshe Ben Yossi, Ben Hashem will have an aliyah. And before Shlem, if you saw Ben Rachel Leah, Rachel Bas Basazada, Rachel Aliana Basia Bracha, Avram Yitzchak Berisha, Chai Bas Bela, and I have one more to add. I forgot to write this down. One second. Avigail Bas Edo Bela Malka. I have to write that down. Fush Lema to all the Cholim, and Shefer Bracha Vatzlacha the Sfinot and Bracha Rachalea, and the Zivit Bukarav to Shmuel David Ben and to Miriam. And special shout out to our sponsors for Seder Nashim, the Imperial Advisory Group. If you need help with your CFO stuff for your company, reach out to them at imperialgrp.com. Okay, here we go. Perek Beis of Nazir. Mishnah Aleph. We're discussing about someone who makes a vow in the Naziris with regards to items that are permitted to a Nazir. As we said yesterday, that a Nazir is also in great products, including wine, can't take a haircut, can't become tamei to a mace. So Harini Nazir menakrogeris and menadvilis. Someone says, I am hereby a Nazir from dried figs or from pressed figs, which a Nazir is permitted to eat. Beishamai Omer Nazir. Beishamai says he's a Nazir. Since he said, I am hereby a Nazir, he becomes a Nazir, and we disregard the second half of his statement about figs. Beis Hillel Omer Eno Nazir. Beis Hillel says he's not a Nazir. Since the Zirs does not apply to figs, his declaration is meaningless and has no effect. Amar Rabbi Yehuda says, Afkish Amar Beis Shammai, who and Beis Shammai says that this declaration is not effective. Lo Amro Ela Ba'omer. They said so only for someone who says that he meant Harei Hena Alai Karban, that the figs should be like me, an offering to me. That the figs should be like an offering to me. Meaning that Beis Shammai agree that the person is not a Nazir, but if he explains that he meant to answer figs to himself like a korban, his declaration counts as a neder vow, and he may not eat figs. Beis Hillel disagrees and permits him to eat figs since they regard the declaration as meaningless. According to Rabbi Yehuda, Beis Shammai agree with Beis Hillel that the person is not a Nazir. However, Beis Shammai ruled that if he intended to make a neder against eating figs, it is kosher, it's valid, because the word Nazir implies to abstain. Beis Hillel, on the other hand, according to Yehuda, regard his vow as meaningless and permit him to eat figs. If he does not explain that he intended his vow to be a neder, then all agree he's permitted to eat figs. Mishnah Beis. If a person said, Amra Parazu, if a person said, quote, this cow said, Hareini Nazira Imamedes Ani. I refuse to stand up, and I will become a Nazir if I do stand up. And I say on the contrary, I will become a Nazir from this cow if it does not stand up. Then the cow stands up on its own. He's basically saying that this cow seems to think that it'll never stand up, but I'll be nazir from the cow if it does not get up. He's making like a interesting claim over here. Amar Hadala says, or in a similar case regarding the jammed door, a person said, this door said, Harini Nazir in Niftach Ani. I refuse to open. I will become a Nazir if I do open. And I say on the contrary, I will become a Nazir from this door if it does not open. and then the door opens on its own. Beishamai Amr Nazir. Beishamai says he's a Nazir, even though there's no such thing as Nazirus from a cow or a door. That's ridiculous. He therefore is usher to drink wine and all the other Nazir items. Um, Beisila says he's not a Nazir. Since there is no Nazirus from a cow or a door, that's ridiculous. His vow is meaningless. Additionally, even a Shammai, the rule that such a Nazir vow is valid, he should agree in this case that since he accepted Nazirus on the condition that the cow would not stand up, and it did. Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said, Afkir Shama Beis even when Beis Shammai said that this declaration is effective, Amru Ela Ba'omer, they said so only for someone who says that he meant Hare Para Alai, Hare Para Zu Alai Karban Imamedasi. This cow should be like an offering to me if she stands up. Meaning that Beis Shammai agreed that the person is not a Nazir, but if he explains that he meant to prohibit the cow or the door to himself like a korban, his declaration counts as a neder vow, and he may not use the cow or door. Beis Hillel disagree and permit him to use them. Like in the previous Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda maintains that all agree that he is not a Nazir, since his vow includes things permitted to a Nazir. Instead, the argument is whether the vow had the status of a neder when he intended to ask the cow or the door to himself like a korban. According to Beis Shammai, the vow is a neder, but Beis Hillel consider it meaningless. Rabbi Yehuda agrees that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel also argue about the second point mentioned above. They mentioned earlier that whether the condition, if the cow does not stand up, was fulfilled. Beis Shammai consider it fulfilled since the owner himself did not pick up the cow. Beis Hillel ruled that since the cow did indeed stand, his condition was not met. Mishnah Gimel. If they poured a cup of wine for a person, he said, I am hereby Nazir from it. Nazir. He is a Nazir. Although his vow referred only to a particular cup of wine, he is a full-fledged Nazir. There was an incident with a certain woman who was drunk, and they poured her a cup of wine. And she said, I am hereby a Nazir from it. The Chachamim said, the woman did not intend to accept Naziris. Rather, she meant to say, "Arei hu alai korban," is like it is for me like a korban. Meaning she intended to forbid this cup of wine to herself with a neder, and used the word Nazir so they would stop pushing her to drink wine. And the cup of wine is asked to her, but she's not a Nazira. Mishnah Dalet. Hareini Nazir, Amana Shehe Shosayan. If someone says, I am hereby a Nazir on condition that I will be permitted to drink wine at the time of the Mason, or he declares, I am a Nazir on condition that I will be allowed to become Tameh from the dead, or he is a Nazir, he's a Nazir. Asr Kulan, and it's forbidden in all the Nazir prohibitions, including drinking wine and becoming Tameh. His condition does not take effect because it is contrary to what is written in the Torah. The next case, Yedea Ani Sheish Nazirus. If someone says, I'm hereby a Nazir, and then he says that I know that there's Nazirus that asers tuma and cutting hair. But I did not know that Nazir is aser to drink wine. So I never intended to accept Nazirus from wine. Or is it aser? He still aser to drink wine because since he accepted some of the Nazir prohibitions, he becomes a full Nazir and is aser in all of the Isurim. Rabbi Shimon permits him to have wine, and in Rabbi Shimon's view, he did not accept all of the Nazir's prohibitions. He actually does not become a Nazir at all. It's either all or nothing, because you can't just do part. Yodea ani Nazir asriyan. If someone says, I'm hereby a Nazir, and then he adds on, I knew when I vowed to be a Nazir that a Nazir is also to drink wine. But I thought that the rabbis would permit it for me. Because I cannot live without wine. So don't become a Nazir. Or he thought that, or he says, I thought they would allow me to become Tameh from the dead because I buried the dead for a living. Versus the Cherukadisha. Therefore, it's impossible for him to fully keep his vow of Nazirus. Harez a mutter. He is permitted in all of the Nazir restrictions because he is not a Nazir. And according to this Tana, a vow that a person cannot fulfill is automatically void, even without asking the sage to annul it. Rabbi Shimon Oser, Rabbi Shimon answers him all of the Nazir restrictions because he considers him a Nazir until he was matir neder with a Talmud. According to Shimon, such a vow is void only if a chacham annuls it. Mishnah Hey, Hareini Alai, Hareini Nazir, Alai the Galeach Nazir. If someone says, I am hereby Nazir, and I also take upon myself to shave a Nazir, to provide the offering for another Nazir to be able to conclude his Nazir and to shave his head. The Shama Chavir Amar and his friend heard him and said, Va'ani va'alai legalech Nazir. And I too take upon myself to shave a Nazir. If they are clever and want to minimize their expenses, each one shaves the other. And they provide the other one with the karbanos he needs to shave his head. This way, each of them has to pay for only one set of Nazir karbanos and not two. Being law, but if they're not clever, and each one brought offerings for his own Nazirs, and they must each shave other Nazirim in order to fulfill the second half of the of the of the neder. Therefore, at the end of the day, each one will have supplied two sets of offerings, one for himself and one for another Nazir. Mishnah Vav. If someone says, I hereby take upon myself to shave half a Nazir, Vishama Chaver Amar and his friend heard it and said, Ani alai legaleh chatzi Nazir, and I hereby take upon myself to shave half a Nazir. Zem legaleh Nazir shalit. This one, the first person must shave and provide the kabbanis for a complete Nazir. Zem legaleh Nazir shalit, and this one must also, and this one must shave a complete Nazir. This is according to Rabbi Meir. According to him, the first part of his declaration implies that he will provide a complete set of karbanos, and the second part, there's half a Nazir is disregarded. The Chachamim say, this one shaves half a Nazir. This one shaves half a Nazir. Each pays for half of a Nazir's offerings. According to the Chachamim, it's clear that his intention is to provide only half the cost of the karbanos. Mishnah Zion. Hareini Nazir liben. If someone says, I am hereby Nazir when a son will be born to me, ben, and the son is born to him, Harez the Nazir, he's a Nazir. Bas, if a daughter is born to him, Tum androgynous, or Tum and androgynous, Aino Nazir, he's not a Nazir because his intention was only for a definite male child. If he said, I am hereby Nazir when I see him, when I see a child born to me. I feel a Noah Labas, even if a daughter is born to him, Tum androgynous or Tum or androgynous. I raise a Nazir, he is a Nazir since all of these are included in having a child. If he specifically said male, then they're excluded. If he said child, then they're all included. Mishnah Ches. He pila ishta. If his wife lost a child, she had a miscarriage. We do not know if it was born being able to live or not. Aino Nazir, he is not a Nazir at all. Even out of doubt. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says he is a Nazir at that. However, since only a definite Nazir may perform the the kabbalas that conclude the Nazir the Nazirus, he must make himself into a definite Nazir in order to be able to conclude his Nazirus. In order to do so, Yomar, he should say, Imahaya came, Imahaya ben Kayam, if the child was able to live, Hare Ani Nazir Chava, and I am already a Nazir because of my previous obligation. Love, and if I was not able to live, so I am not yet a Nazir, Hare Ani Nazir Nadava, I'm hereby a Nazir voluntarily. This way, in this way, the person is now a definite Nazir, and at the end of his term, he can perform the concluding rituals and his Naziros. Chazru Yalda. If she gave birth again, this time to a child that lives, her raised a Nazir. He's a Nazir since the child fulfills the condition he made in his vow. Rabbi Shimon says he is again a Nazir at a doubt, since we are unsure whether the first child fulfilled his original condition. However, since only a definite Nazir may perform the concluding rituals, Yomar should say, in Harishon ben Kayam, if the first child was able to live, Harishon Cholev is Vizuna Dava. Then the first Nazirus was obligatory, and this new Nazirus that I now accept is voluntary. Being love, if the first child was not able to live, Harishon Nadava Vizuchava, and this first Nazirus was voluntary, and this one is it's an obligation. Once again, his declaration ensures that no matter what happened, he is now a definite Nazir, and at the end of his term, he can conclude with the necessary rituals. Two more Mishnayos to go. Test and Yud. Test. Harini Nazir. Someone says, I'm here by a Nazir. Nazir Kishiyi Eliben, and I will again be a Nazir when I have a son. He accepted upon himself a standard term of Nazirus plus a second term to begin when he has a son. His Kamona Shlo, and he began counting his own term. But Akakach Nola Ben, and his son was then born to him before the end of his first term. Mashlim Shlo, he continues his Nazirus until he completes his own term and performs the concluding rituals. Then he counts the Nazirus of his son and again performs the concluding ritual. Since he cannot observe both terms of Nazirus at once, he first completes his own term and then observes his son's Nazirus. If he says, I'm hereby a Nazir when I will have a son, the Nazir, and I'm hereby a Nazir, he first declares his son's Nazirus and then a regular term of Nazirus. His Shalo, if he begins counting his own term, and a son was then born to him before he finished his term, he sets aside the count of his own term, and counts his son's term since he accepted his son's Nazirus first. And after he completes his son's Nazirus, he completes the rest of his own term. So it's like it's divided up. Mishnah Yud, last one for today. Harini Nazir Ben. If someone says, I'm hereby Nazir when I will have a son, with the Nazir Me'ayom, and I'm hereby Nazir for 100 days, he accepts upon himself two terms. One, if he has a son, and the other, a regular term of Nazirus that will last for 100 days, and he'll begin count, and he begins counting on his own term. Nolo Ben Adshivim, if a son is born to him at any time after 70 days into his own term, he loses nothing. After he completes his son's Nazirus and resumes his own, he observes only the remaining days of his own Nazirus. Since he has 30 days or more left, he concludes his term without observing extra days of Nazirus. However, if the son was born after 70 days into his term, so says Shivim, he forfeits back to 70. The days after 70 are not counted. So that when he starts counting his own term, again, after completing his son's, he must count a full 30 days. Because there's no head shaving for the concluding ritual with a growth of less than 30 days. Since we learned in the previous mission that he must shave at the conclusion of his son's term, he must observe another 30 days of Nazir before he can shave and conclude his own term. That's all for today. See you tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.